The UFC is kicking off 2026 with back-to-back numbered cards. UFC 324 goes down this weekend, but just next week we have UFC 325, headlined by Alexander Volkanovski and Diego Lopes. So in this video, I'm going to be giving you guys my full card predictions, main card, and the prelims for UFC 325. Definitely a little bit of a step down from 324, but still a really strong, second card to start off the year here. If you enjoy the video, hit the like button, subscribe. Timestamps for every matchup are going to be in the description, so if you guys want to jump around, that is totally fine. But let's dive into the first prelim matchup. And I do want to say that there are 4 Road to the UFC fights on this card. I was planning on making predictions for these fights, but UFC Fight Pass is just so awful to use, and I just really struggled to see these guys' previous fights on Road to the UFC. Either they were like completely buried in Fight Pass, or it was, telling me I didn't have access, even though I have an account. If you use Fight Pass, I'm sure you understand how awful it is. So I'm not going to do the Road to the UFC fights, but I think there's still 10 other fights that I'm going to be covering here. So we're going to start off with Kaan Ofli taking on Yizha. For Ofli here, I really doubted him heading into his last fight against Ricardo Ramos. Ended up picking up his first UFC win, submitted him in the first round. 6 of his 12 wins have come by submission. I still think he's a pretty below average athlete for UFC standards. Also pretty undersized at 5'7" with a 66-inch reach. And then on the feet, he is pretty limited, but definitely, a pretty solid grappler. On the other side with Yizha, he picked up also his first UFC win in 2025, 37-second knockout against Weston Wilson. Now, admittedly, a win against Weston Wilson isn't anything all that crazy. I don't think he's on the UFC roster anymore. At the time he was one of, if not the worst fighter on the roster. So Yizha, good that he got the win there, but it's nothing crazy. He's actually primarily a grappler, even though he did get it done by KO. 14 of his 26 wins have come by submission. So is this going to be one of these grappler versus grappler matchups where they kind of just opt to strike? Are they going to, have a bunch of fun grappling exchanges? I think that's certainly up in the air. I do just lean towards Yizha. I think the grappling could definitely be competitive. I just don't see Ofli coming in and completely ragdolling Yizha. And then I think if it stays on the feet, I just don't trust Ofli in that realm. So I'm going to pick Yizha to win this one by decision. In the next matchup, we have Jonathan Micallef taking on Oban Elliot. This fight was originally scheduled in September. Elliot got sick, had to pull out. Not quite sure why it took so long to rebook this one, but we're finally getting it here in January. And these guys are just coming off of very different last performances. Micallef, I did not pick him to win his UFC debut. He had a super impressive performance against Kevin Jousset. He's a southpaw striker, landed a ton of kicks in that fight, was ripping, his southpaw kicks to the body, dropped him by going up top to the head after, landing a ton to the body. The hands go down, he goes up top, sends Jousset to the canvas. We did see him fade a little bit into the third round, so maybe if Elliot pushes a pace, could be a potential issue here for Micallef, but overall, really solid debut. He's also a capable grappler and is pretty solid in the clinch. Now, looking at Oban Elliot, he kind of had a lot of hype behind his name, had a few solid performances to start off his UFC career. He looked absolutely awful in his last fight against Hyung Ko. He was a minus 500 favorite and just got clearly 30-27, got outstruck, was dominated on the ground. He didn't have success anywhere. And Ko looks solid. I don't think he's some sort of world beater here in this weight class. So Elliot's primarily a grappler. On the feet, can be a little bit chinny. I'm just going to lean towards Micallef. I think Elliot should look to grapple in this matchup, but I think Micallef can stuff the takedowns enough to keep it standing, and I do think he's just going to do more work on the feet. So I'm going to take Micallef to win this one by decision. At middleweight, we have Jacob Malkoun taking on Torrez Finney. This is a pure grappler versus grappler matchup. Malkoun is 4-3 in the UFC. Realistically, he should be 5-2. He had a fight against Cody Brundage where he was dominating, was going to get a finish, ended up getting DQ'd for elbows to the back of the head. So I guess technically the right call, but I think it's more fair to say he's a 5-2 caliber fighter as opposed to 4-3. Grappling heavy pace, averages 6.6 takedowns per 15 minutes. In his 3 decision wins within the UFC, he's racked up 29 total minutes of control time. He's been out for a while, though, out since March of 2024 with a bulging disc. So definitely a concerning injury there. We'll see if he's, close to 100% in this matchup. On the other side with Torrez Finney, he's undefeated at 11-0. His UFC debut was pretty brutal. It was about as bad of a performance as you could have in a win, where he landed 8 takedowns. He racked up 13 minutes of control time. So he was on top of the other dude for 13 minutes. He landed 4 significant strikes. I want to say he only attempted 8 total significant strikes. So this was like the definition of lay and pray. It was like, I'm just going to hold you down. You're not going to be able to do any damage, but I'm not going to do anything, to advance position or actually land any damage here. And so it was awful to watch. I think it actually ended up being a split decision. Shouldn't have been, but just a terrible fight to watch. He did have 3 pretty solid performances on the Contender Series. He has a really odd frame for this weight class where he's very short at 5'8", has really long arms for his height with a 75-inch reach, but he is just really limited on the feet. And so he's just kind of desperate to get the fight to the ground. And I think we saw that in his last fight where he knows he can't stay at range with pretty much anyone in this weight class. And so even if he can't find a submission or land anything meaningful on the ground, he is going to do everything in his power to just keep his opponent pinned against the cage, pinned on the ground. And I just think Malkoun's a little bit more well-rounded. He is not some sort of great striker, but I think he's a little bit more competent in that area than Torrez Finney. And we've seen Malkoun go up against some solid grapplers and have a lot of success. He out-grappled Brendan Allen in their fight. Malkoun did lose like a close decision, but landed more takedowns, had more control time. So I don't think Finney's going to come in here and ragdoll Malkoun. If the fight's on the feet, I prefer Malkoun. So I'm going to take Malkoun to win this one by decision. Next up, we've got Cam Rowston taking on Cody Brundage. And Rowston's kind of a weird guy to evaluate. He's big for this weight class. This is a middleweight fight. He's got kind of a funky style. He's not super technical, but he does have just like a lot of raw explosiveness and power. We saw in his last fight, he like dropped Petrosky with this like super short, awkward looking like left hook where it looked like he barely landed. And Petrosky doesn't have the best chin, but sat him down, found the finish shortly after. He has finished 12 of his 13 wins, 5 by knockout, 7 by submission. His strength of schedule has been very, very weak. Only 4 of his 13 wins have had a winning record. And we actually did see him on the Contender Series against Torrez Finney, where he was dominated on the ground, was taken down 10 times on only 14 attempts, was controlled for 12 minutes. So it does seem possible he could get control grappled in this matchup or just in future UFC fights. Now, looking at Cody Brundage, he has a 5-6-1 UFC record with 1 no contest. It's kind of a miracle that he has reached 13 fights within the UFC. He has had a knockout loss turned into a draw. He had 2 other fights that looked like inevitable KO losses that ended up turning into, one was a no contest, I think against Razak Al-Hassan, and then he turned another one of those, I just talked about it, against Jacob Malkoun into a W. His like legitimate wins, just like removing the Malkoun one, are against Dulce Lugambula, Tresean Gore, Zachary Reese, and Julian Marquez. He's just beating like very low levels of competition. He's at his best when he gets his wrestling going, 2.1 takedowns per 15 minutes, 46% takedown accuracy. He just doesn't always have the urgency to actually go in there and use the wrestling. He has pretty low output on the feet. Defensively, he's not a great grappler, also can just get like outdogged in fights. Although I will give him a shout out. His fight against Julian Marquez was awesome. Back and forth fight. Did pick up the win in that one. I just think Rowston is way more physically gifted, and there's some concern of him just getting control grappled, but I think he's going to be able to do enough damage on the feet, land some big shots. I think he's going to get Brundage out of there early. So I'm going to go with Cam Rowston, round 1 knockout. Now, moving up 1 weight class to light heavyweight, we have Junior Tafa taking on Billy Elekana. For Tafa here, 2-4 in the UFC. He is coming off a submission loss against Tuco Tucos. That was not a good loss for him. Tokos is really nothing special, so that was pretty underwhelming from Tafa. He's a powerful striker, kind of similar to his brother. It's like the same layout. They're dangerous strikers. They have a lot of power, but they just have zero ground game, and both of them are just like super unreliable fight to fight. For Billy Elekana, 2-1 in the UFC, coming off his first finish in the UFC, submission win against Kevin Christian. He's got a rangy frame for the weight class, 6'3", 77-inch reach. He's a guy who wants to fight at range, land his kicks, but is also a capable grappler. And that's just where I think he's going to separate himself in this matchup. Junior Tafa cannot grapple. You can clinch him. If you close the distance, you're going to be able to get him down. You're going to be able to wear on him. So I think Elekana gets the wrestling going early. I think the first round, it's just going to be more control heavy, kind of wearing him out. And I think he ends up finding the submission in the second round. I believe this next fight is the start of the main card. We've got Quillan Salkilld taking on Jamie Mullarkey. This was originally supposed to be Salkilld against Rongju, which was already kind of odd matchmaking. Rongju has to pull out, so Mullarkey steps in. Tough spot for Mullarkey. Feel pretty good about Salkilld in this matchup. He's a fun prospect, 10-1 as a pro. His only loss was his MMA debut, or his pro MMA debut. 3-0 in the UFC, coming off a nasty round 1 head kick KO against Nasrat Hakparast. That was a big step up in competition. Believe that fight was on short notice, and like that was a, or knockout of the year contender in that fight. He's a big lightweight, 6 feet tall, 75-inch reach. He's well-rounded. He's powerful on the feet, but also has very solid wrestling. We've seen in his 3 UFC fights and then his 1 fight on the Contender Series, he has 2 round 1 knockouts, and then he has 2 decision wins. In those 2 decision wins, he has landed 17 total takedowns. On the other side with Jamie Mullarkey, I think from a skill perspective, he is pretty solid. Technically, he's a pretty well-rounded guy. He's a clean striker, can push a solid pace. He's willing to grapple, averages just under 2.5 takedowns per 15 minutes. The big issue for Mullarkey is that he doesn't have crazy finishing upside, and then he's just always at a durability deficit where he has been knocked out in his last 4 losses. In his last 8 fights, he has landed 0 knockdowns, and he has been knocked down 6 times himself. And so just when you get into these back and forth fights and one guy just has a way better opportunity of hurting you, dropping you, knocking you out, it's going to be tough to find a lot of consistency, and you just have to fight so perfectly. I don't think that's going to happen here against Salkilld. I think Salkild's going to find a big shot early on, and I think he picks up the KO in round 1. Moving all the way up to heavyweight, we have Tuivasa taking on Tallison Teixeira. I'm going to be honest, I kind of hate this matchmaking. It really sucks for Ty. Like, it's a bad matchup, or at least it's not a great matchup. Teixeira is getting the opportunity. He already got skyrocketed into that main event against Derek Lewis. He had 1 fight. He had under 1 minute of UFC cage time, got skyrocketed into a main event against Derek Lewis, got knocked out in the first minute, and now he's still getting to fight up in the rankings. I don't really get it. This seems to be like a new theme with the UFC early on in this year with some of these cards where like you can tell when they're high on a fighter, even when they completely flop in like their opportunity to fight up, they just like don't really care and continue to give them opportunities, which I think is pretty bogus. We're seeing it with John Silva this weekend, right? He loses to Diego Lopes, was already getting skyrocketed up the rankings. He gets to fight up again. Mauricio Ruffy also on this card. It's a similar thing. He, loses fighting up. Now he gets to fight up again. It just doesn't make a ton of sense to me. And also part of this is just because I don't want to see Tai Tuivasa lose again. He's currently on a 5-fight losing streak. 4 of those have been by finish. His last win was all the way back in February of 2022. Now, his strength of schedule has been very tough. Cyril Gane, Sergey Pavlovich, Alexander Volkov, Marcin Tybura, Jairzinho Rosenstruck. Like, there's not an easy fight, especially just for like Tuivasa's skill set amongst those 5. And so it's just tough. Now he's going up against another super dangerous striker in Tallison Teixeira. I kind of have a philosophy on heavyweight matchmaking where I think everyone agrees that heavyweight is like the clear-cut worst weight class in the UFC. The depth is terrible. even in the top 15, like there's maybe 3, 4, 5 fighters that you're like, these guys have a chance of actually winning the belt. Whereas in other weight classes, like there's just not such an extreme drop off from like the champion to number 15. And so my philosophy is that at heavyweight, you should pretty much be determining like, is this guy actually a contender or a future contender? Or is this someone who you should just be putting in fun fights? Tai Tuivasa is an example of a guy who should always be fighting outside the rankings. He should be fighting other out of shape, like primarily striking fighters, and just having these fun performances. I think Derek Lewis should also be falling into that same bucket. I think when you start giving Tai Tuivasa like a matchup against Marcin Tybura, it's like you know what's going to happen. It's entertaining for no one. We don't even really learn anything about Tybura in that kind of fight. And so I'd prefer Tuivasa to just be fighting like some random slug on the, outside the top 15. But he's got this tough fight. At Tuivasa's best, he's a super dangerous striker. 13 of his 14 wins have come by knockout. He's more athletic than he looks, but that's not really anything crazy because he looks like he'd be extremely unathletic. It does seem like he's actually in better shape heading into this fight, but he still is just going to be so undersized in this matchup. He really has no grappling threat. His takedown defense is not good. And then he's just too hittable on the feet, absorbs 5.2 significant strikes per minute. On the other side with Teixeira, this dude is massive, 6'7", 83-inch reach. He's 26 years old, 8-1 as a pro, all finishes, 7 knockouts, 1 submission win. He is coming off his first career loss, like I mentioned, against Derek Lewis. And then both of his UFC fights have actually gone 35 seconds. So had a knockout win in 35 seconds, had a knockout loss in 35 seconds. He hits hard. He is athletic, like he's throwing head kicks at heavyweight, which is kind of scary to see. He's still very green, though, as a fighter. He's never left the first round. Every single fight he's had has ended within the first 5 minutes. I'm going to be picking Teixeira here. Now, would it be crazy if Tai Tuivasa, found the KO punch? No, I don't think so, but I just think you simulate this fight, 100 times. I think Teixeira wins the majority of them. So I'm going to go with Tallison Teixeira, round 1 KO. When Teixeira wins, it is very early on. Next up, we've got Rafael Fiziev going up against Mauricio Ruffy. Like I just mentioned, I don't know how Ruffy is getting this fight. And it is funny because, like, a lot of the guys I'm complaining about, I actually do like them. Like, I like Jean Silva. I like Mauricio Ruffy. I'm cool with Tallison Teixeira. But I can also point out that it's just kind of whack. Like, Ruffy is fighting up. Also, like, not even a close performance. At least Jean Silva was, like, very competitive against Lopes. Ruffy got dominated, embarrassed by Benoit Saint-Denis, and now he gets to fight up while Fiziev has to fight down after fighting down already and beating Bahamondes. Doesn't make a ton of sense to me. Stylistically, though, it is a super fun fight. Fiziev, Muay Thai base, great kicks. His switch kicks are so powerful. He throws these big hooks in combination. He works the body really well, pushes a pretty high pace, but can kind of fade into round 3. His last 3 decisions, he's actually lost round 3 in all 3 of them. He is pretty durable, but is kind of hittable on the feet. He actually lands exactly 4.77 significant strikes per minute, and he absorbs 4.77 significant strikes per minute. On the other side with Ruffy, he really looked like unrecognizable in his fight against Benoit. He couldn't defend the takedown. On the feet, he looked like a deer in the headlights. He was gun shy. He was constantly retreating. He allowed Benoit to close distance without punishing him at all. And I think there's like an interesting question here where, was this only a problem because he was going up against a grappler and he was just like terrified of the takedown? Or is this something that's going to happen or, be more prevalent against just higher level guys where he doesn't have this like extreme confidence that he's just going to go in and nuke you? Because fighting Rafael Fiziev is not the same as fighting, an older Bobby Green or a James Lontop or a Jamie Mullarkey. Like, this is still a huge step up in competition from the guys he has beaten so far within the UFC. But at his best, he is a great striker. He's super fluid, very creative. He hits hard. Outside of the Benoit fight, he has managed range. very, very well. And then when he's winning fights, he's winning them by knockout. 11 of his 12 wins have come by KO. The cardio now definitely in question. We kind of saw hints of that in the Lon Top fight, but also seemed like he was fading pretty bad against Benoit. And he does have this style where he's throwing a lot of like high energy techniques, so it's not shocking that he kind of fades. I think this fight is pretty close to a toss-up. I think you can make a case for either guy. I do think the size, like the range, is going to play a factor in this matchup. Fiziev is just a very small 155er. I think he should still be moving down to 145. I think he could pretty easily make the weight. I think the title picture is also a little bit more wide open down there. So I've been talking about Fiziev moving down. Fiziev, I don't think, has the same finishing upside in this matchup, but I also just kind of trust Fiziev more as a fighter. I just think he's the better overall guy. He's faced some really tough opponents, right? He's gone to war with Justin Gaethje twice. I know he didn't get the wins there, but he was very close, very competitive in those matchups. I'm a little bit worried about Fiziev very early on, but I do think this could be one of those fights where Ruffy looks great to start off. He's keeping the range. He's throwing some big shots, making it look flashy. But Fiziev just starts to be able to close the distance, get his combinations off. And I think this could be one where Ruffy wins the first round. Fiziev starts to pull away in round 2, round 3. So I'm going to slightly lean towards Fiziev here, and I think he gets it done by decision. Now we have arrived at the co-main event. Super fun fight on paper. Dan Hooker going up against Benoit Saint Denis. And Dan Hooker's just such a BMF. He fought Arman back in November, just a couple of months ago, and he is already back against a super tough Benoit. He is a big lightweight, 6 feet tall, 75.5-inch reach. He likes to use those long-range weapons, the teeps, jabs, straight punches, pushes a high pace, high volume striker, but he is pretty hittable, absorbs 4.7 significant strikes per minute. We have seen him really kind of struggle against these super explosive fighters. I do think Benoit kind of fits into that grouping. From a grappling perspective, his takedown defense isn't terrible. It's at 77%, but going up against better grapplers, like we saw Gamrot take him down 5 times. Arman took him down twice. Now, some of that was like Dan trying to jump the ghillie, but Arman was able to control him once he got him down there, did end up submitting him. I got to say, like, the ghillie looked pretty good from Hooker. Arman is just like crazy and is potentially the best guy in this weight class. I'd probably have number 2 behind Ilya. But for Benoit here, he had 2 really tough back-to-back losses against Dustin Poirier, was really embarrassed by Renato Moicano, but he has rattled off 3 straight wins, had a submission win against Kyle Prepolek, submitted Mauricio Ruffy in a dominant performance, and then knocked out Beneil Dariush in 16 seconds. He pushes a very high pace, both on the feet and in the grappling, 5.1 significant strikes per minute, 4.3 takedowns per 15. He's a southpaw striker. He attacks all 3 levels. He just rips that left kick to the legs, to the body, up top. On the feet, he is pretty hittable, 42% striking defense, which is not great. I do think in this matchup, though, I like Benoit's ability to really mix it up. I think he can have success with the grappling, and like Hooker's going to be game. I think he's going to hang in there. He's super tough, but he also doesn't have like that true one-punch KO power where I think he can really take advantage of Benoit's lack of defense. And so I think Benoit is going to start to build some momentum. I think he's going to find a finish in the second round. I've kind of gone back and forth on knockout or submission. I'm going to lean towards knockout, but I think he's live, honestly, to win in any of the 3 ways. And now in the final fight of the night, we have Alexander Volkanovski taking on Diego Lopes. I don't want to complain about the matchmaking for every single fight. I think it's very weird this is the matchup, but not going to go down that road. We get the rematch here, and I'll throw it out there. I picked Diego Lopes to win the first fight, and honestly, like looking back on it, I don't even really hate the process. I talked about how like technically Volk's the better guy. I thought Volk would win the rounds. I thought, he would be looking like the better guy in the vast majority of the fight. I just thought Lopes had that danger factor. Volk, chin a little bit suspect at this point in his career. aging, and I thought that Volk would find the chin, or sorry, Lopes would find the chin and land the knockout. We saw him hurt Volk in round two, maybe hurt him a little bit, and I think it was the fourth round, but Volk looked really solid, ended up picking up the decision win. All those things are still kind of there. Like Volk is 37 years old. There is a lot of wear and tear on the chin, but I do kind of like the overall run out here for Volk in this matchup, where this is not some sort of quick turnaround. He has not fought since he last beat Diego Lopes. It's a 9-month layoff. He has the same opponent. In the first fight, like he outlanded Lopes 158 to 63 in significant strikes. And so it's not like I'm any more concerned about the chin. It seems like he's got things dialed in. I think from like a game plan perspective, I just trust Volk and his team to execute better than Diego Lopes. But you definitely can't count Lopes out. He's super dangerous. He's coming off the highlight reel KO against Jean Silva. I think the issue here for Lopes is like, I just didn't really see anything new in that Jean Silva fight that makes me think he has a way better shot in this matchup against Volk in the rematch here. Like, maybe you could point to the grappling. Like, he did land some nice ground and pound, really was able to control Jean Silva. But then it's like, do I think he can translate that in a fight with Volk? Like, no, I don't think Lopes is going to go in there and ragdoll Volk. I kind of think it was more of an indictment on Jean Silva. And also just like, Jean Silva's undersized for the weight class. Like, the size difference looked crazy in that matchup against Lopes. And so, like, on the feet, he looked like the same guy. He's hittable. He kind of tenses up on his shots. He's going to swing big, but, like, he's not setting a ton of things up. He's just very reliant on his durability and his raw power, and that can win you a fight. Like, if you simulate this fight 100 times, Lopes will catch Volk in his fair share of those. I just think more often than not, Volk is going to win this matchup, especially after seeing the first one, how it played out. I'm going to stick with Volk by decision. I will say I'm going to be a little bit upset if I feel like I've broken it down solidly and they just end up like flipping the result, right? Like I picked Lopes, I think like round 1 or round 2 KO in the first fight. Volk wins by decision. And then if I pick Volk by decision now and Lopes gets that early KO, I'll be a little bit butthurt about it, but I'm going to be riding with Volk here. I think he gets it done by decision. Just needs to avoid that huge shot against Lopes. But that is going to wrap it up for my full card predictions. Let me know your thoughts on this card. Who do you guys have in the main, co-main? Let me hear it in the comments. But thank you all for stopping by, and I will see you in the next one.